On the night of the 30th of September 1944, the Zalmoxis experiment had borne its bitter fruit. In the Romanian territory of Greenland, far and away from the chaos and gore of the Grand Encirclement, a small collection of top scientists and generals sat in a shallow trench, with Sergiu Cristecu himself among them, wearing dark goggles as the device is held high by the tension wires a number of miles away. Flares are remotely deployed ahead of the test. 25 minutes, 15 minutes, 10, 5. In an instant, the stars gave way to a brightness many times harsher than that of the midday sun. Miles of deep, packed ice were sublimated into thin air. The mountains of the valley were laid bare of their snow, which melted into streams that immediately boiled away. All the windows were shattered in the nearest city, Godthab, which was thought to be outside the zone of effect. The power of the Zalmoxis device was supposed to be equivalent to 5,000 tons of TNT. It was, in reality, equivalent to 5 times that amount. As the mushroom cloud reached high into the heavens and the deafening roar subsided, the stars returned to the sky, as though to judge mankind for this blasphemous thing. As restrained applause and awed murmurs could be heard amongst the group of officials, it was clear that nothing so terrible had ever yet been crafted by mortal hands. The government told the people that the Godthalb test was a volcanic explosion, and that the caldera left there was still active and therefore a forbidden zone. The war would be over soon, and an age of unmatched terror was about to begin. The war had claimed 53 million lives by then. Back in Romania, the nuclear reactors of Hungary got to work producing 4 more nuclear bombs according to the now confirmed blueprints of the Zalmoxis device. A great deal of military factories were also reallocated from the production of infantry equipment to the construction of Mark II strategic bombers in order to properly deliver the payload. On the 27th of December, the first of them was completed. At 9 p.m., on the 28th of December 1944, Karlsruhe was struck. A singular bomber, flying lonely overhead, dropped its dire payload, and 400,000 people were vaporized in an instant. Chaos shot through Bavaria as General Cristecu sent them a capitulation demand. Consul Held had perished in the blast, and so the head general of the Bavarian military, Edward von Hartmann, was appointed emergency consul. He rejected the demand, and as such, on the 27th of March 1945, Nuremberg was bombed. On the 23rd of May, Stuttgart was also struck. Romania was prepared to sterilize all that was left of Bavaria and wanted the world to know that this was the fate of any who stood against the Iron Guard. General von Hartmann refused to surrender where his predecessor would have done so without hesitation. Instead, von Hartmann decided to continue his game of apocalyptic chess with Cristecu. He commanded a full civilian retreat, meaning any non-conscripted Bavarian was to flee out of the country and into Valois under pains of forcible deportation. If the Romanian superweapon was unable to kill in such large numbers, its mass destruction of population centers would not have nearly the same effect. Cristecu knew this, but he also knew he had a window of time where the evacuations were still underway before von Hartmann could lessen the impact of his atomic bomb. As such, General Cristecu commanded the construction of more nuclear reactors and therefore nuclear bombs, utilizing slave labor to its fullest extent without regard to their survival. He planned for a universal atomic bombardment, where every major city in Bavaria would be struck at once, hopefully resulting in the capitulation of Bavaria. Tens of thousands of undesirables would die of radiation poisoning as a result of such programs, and the Matamorti barely had to actively kill the prisoners, as the work they were given killed them first. They were some of the first to die in such a way, skin sloughing off their bones as their DNA fell apart, and they were left a husk. As scientists began to arrive at the camps in the name of bioatomic research, there was a revolt in Kursk on the 15th of June, in which a group of Mestakati tried to cause a reactor meltdown. Romanian scientists were able to stop it from reaching a critical point, but by that time around 15,000 people had escaped into the countryside during the panic. After that incident, Karastin was converted into a death camp, meant solely for the systematic extermination of domesticati. Its method of execution was changed from firing squad to radioactive exposure as a grim reference to the revolt. The Manamorti also redoubled their efforts throughout Romania and the occupied territories to find worthy subjects. The amount of people being sent to the Tabarin more than doubled, and the captain of the Manamorti, Ion Emanuel Cuza, replaced all local police forces in the major Romanian and occupied cities with Manamorti contingents. Captain Cuza was out for revenge, and he would slake his monstrous thirst thereof with blood. Bionuclear testing also continued with special vigor at Poltava, the Gypsy Tabarin. They were testing the effects of radiation on human life with inquiries into super-soldier therapies. On the 22nd of July 1945, Bavaria was bisected in the north, and the infantry of the 16th Army made contact with the Valenciennes border. By late August, almost 3 more warheads were ready, but Bavaria was simply running out of people and were being pushed back. The bombs being prepared, therefore, could be saved for Valois, or even saved for use in the next war, if there would be one. On the 8th of October, General von Hartmann killed himself via hanging, believing the war would be lost, no matter how many lives he threw away. As such, Admiral Rudolf Geiss took over the position and carried on much as his predecessor had. On the 16th of February 1946, the universal bombardment was carried out. 10 warheads were to hit the following targets: the Bavarian cities of Darmstadt, Mainz, Nuremberg, Hanover, and their capital of Karlsruhe, as well as the Valenciennes cities of Frankfurt, Neinburg, Münster, Maastricht, and their capital of Köln. However, due to Valenciennes air superiority in the north, 2 planes had to be diverted back south and were to strike Köln and Karlsruhe a second time, sparing Hanover and Neinburg. Roughly 5 million people perished in the universal bombardment. World War III had claimed over 85 million lives by February of 1946. All the major cities of Bavaria were essentially made uninhabitable by that point, and the Bavarian government was forced to move entirely to the front lines, the only place they were guaranteed not to be nuked. Gains were made on all sides of the Grand Encirclement as Valois began to lose heart, many soldiers beginning their desertion to England. Stuttgart was hit on the 10th of March, just for good measure on the half of the generals. Köln was struck again on the 28th of March, aiding the French in their massive advance towards the Valenciennes capital. On the 3rd of May, Mao Zedong, the leader of GB Sanma, began to threaten war with the communists of the Khalkha proletariat in Mongolia. Now, while nothing came from this, it did alert the communists as to the necessity of forming their own faction once the Iron Pact emerges from the Third World War. Meanwhile, in an attempt to beat the European Association into submission once and for all, 10 more nuclear bombs were dropped across the same targets in a second universal bombardment. This brought the universal death toll to around 91 million dead. On the 12th of December 1946, a mass desertion took place within the Bavarian and Valenciennes ranks, and the armies of the Iron Pact began their rapid advance at all fronts. On the 24th of December, ruined Karlsruhe was taken without a fight, and Bavaria capitulated to Romania, but left administration of its remaining lands to the Papal States, which tried and failed to claim ownership of Bavaria's corpse. Switzerland capitulated to France on the 27th of December. On the 30th of December, Valois capitulated to France, and the French turned the remaining Valenciennes territory into a puppet government under Francis Lanois. Meanwhile, by January, climactic changes were starting to be seen and felt due to Romania's use of their superweapon. Rates of cancer began to increase across the globe, and plants started to die halfway across the world. Global temperatures plummeted by a full degree by the beginning of 1947, with signs of further acceleration. Across the Channel, England began to clog the waters separating them from France with a great deal of ships, in the hopes that a naval invasion would be frustrated to the point of failure. Asturias and Burgundy-Home capitulated to the Iron Pact on the 20th of February, further sinking the European Association. With that, England stood with Cascadia as their only ally against the Iron Pact. On the 25th of July, to aid the Valenciennes naval invasion of England, London was bathed in nuclear fire. On the 1st of August, England, realizing its doom, capitulated, and their Prime Minister Francis Leonard sailed out on an aircraft carrier bearing the white flag. The belligerents met in the city of Freiburg to negotiate terms of peace. Ultimately, Bavaria was annexed, while Valois and England were puppeted. This peace seemed too easy for some, particularly Brazil, who was away from the main front of the war in Europe and dragged the Iron Pact into several minor wars against their neighbors shortly thereafter. As the many wars continued and the global temperatures dropped by an additional 2 degrees by the end of 1947, it would seem that the Iron Pact was destined to rule over the frigid Earth. Sergiu Cristecu died looking out over the ruined city of Freiburg, succumbing to an infection suffered from a cut while tending to his private garden. He was succeeded by Emanuel Cuza, the captain of the Mana Morti. The future would seem like heaven for some and hell for many, many others. Over the next 70 years, the Iron Pact would assault the disunited and insular communist states of the world who failed to organize, and either obliterate any loose ends or bring them into the fold. Romania declared that it had completed its genocide by the 1970s, and the Tabren were converted back into purely slave labor camps for dissidents in 1973, eventually being shuttered entirely in 1980. The space program began in 1981, due in large part to the environmental feedback loops caused by the overuse of nuclear weapons, making the environment of Earth increasingly hostile. In fact, the global population continued to decline after the cessation of the war, and a quarter of the land on Earth was essentially unfit for human habitation. A man was put into space in 1985, and by 1986, Romania asserted its own dominance over the members of the Iron Pact, tired from literal decades of total war. They had no choice but to submit, and some of their populations were turned into slave labor. By the 1990s, permanent bases on the moon were achieved through the tireless work of Romanian scientists. By 2013, the Tabren were reopened for the mass execution of slave laborers, seeing as automated machines had largely replaced them. Another 150 million were killed there before they were shuttered again in 2050, as any people that the all-encompassing global state had deemed undesirable had been reduced to an almost non-existent minority. Looking towards the stars, Romania found in itself renewed purpose. After so many generations of blood and struggle, they had achieved a world that was unblemished, a global Romanian homeland where there was truth in the blood. Now it looked to the boundless heavens and saw there a claim to their own infinite empire, to the edge of the horizon and then beyond it. Whatever creation had to offer, it belonged to the race.